Hello and welcome to another video, and today I'm going to be making not necessarily an election prediction but more of a sort of trends map to see how every single state will trend in the 2016 presidential from the 2020 presidential election compared to the 2016 presidential election. So I'm going to have I'm going to have the map from 2016, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to give every single state, I'm going to characterize every single state as red that I think will go more Republican than in 2016, and the ones that go more Democrat will be in blue. So I'm just going to, so you could have like Donald Trump like improving by like 1% in Oregon, and then I just give it to him even if Biden still wins the state, something like that. So it's not an election prediction, so this is different than that. So I'm going to start off by going into the Midwest. I think that an important thing to know in the Midwest is that Gary Johnson took around 5% of the vote in every single state. And I don't think that Justin Amash will become the Libertarian presidential nominee. I think that it will be Jacob Hornberger. He Hornberger has already won 7 states, and he's like the only one on the ballot in New York, so he has a massive advantage. And I don't think that Jacob Hornberger could really get the same support that Gary Johnson had in 2016. So I think that many of the Gary Johnson voters, maybe 3 to 5%, 3 to 4 to 5, even in some cases, percent of the voters who went to Gary Johnson will then go back to they'll go to Donald Trump just because they really don't have any other choice. So you could see places like Indiana, Wyoming, Montana, North and South Dakota, Kansas, Oklahoma going to Trump. I also think that this applies to Nebraska. I don't really know how much Johnson got in like every single congressional district, but I'm just going to assume that he got around 5% in every single one, just because he won around 4.6% of the vote in Nebraska. Then you have Utah, which went to which there was a large portion of the vote which went to Evan McMullen. So he's not going to run again. I don't think he will. And then you could see 20% shift in favor of Republicans in Utah. So I think that he'd take it would trend in his way. Now I'm going to look at some states which I think will trend into Joe Biden's favor. So we could start off with Vermont, where you had around 5% of the write-in vote for uh, Bernie Sanders. I think that um, there will still be a sizable portion of the vote that goes to a Bernie Sanders write-in. But I think that Joe Biden will do better with Bernie Sanders voters than Hillary Clinton. You do have many Bernie Sanders voters who were just anti-Hillary Clinton voters, and I think that they just go to Joe Biden. So you could see maybe a 2 to 3% shift in favor of Joe Biden in Vermont. Massachusetts, I think that one shifted in favor of Hillary Clinton, actually. I think that the trend will continue to favor Democrats in Massachusetts, and they'll gain another like 2%, something like that. But they're actually wait, I wanted to change this. Gary Johnson, his vice presidential candidate was Bill Weld, and Bill Weld was he's from Massachusetts. I think that helped him, and there were a lot of libertarians in Massachusetts. I do think that Hornberger won't be able to replicate the same amount of uh, on this 100,000 votes in Massachusetts. I think that it will narrowly trend towards Donald Trump, but it's not really anything that's important. It's not drastic. Also, we're going to have Colorado trending in favor of Joe Biden and New Mexico. I think that the case for New Mexico was just that the Latino population is so large. But something interesting is that Gary Johnson won 9% of the vote here. if all of that vote went to Donald Trump, he would have won the states. I do doubt that Donald Trump could win New Mexico. Same with Colorado, but you do have really a large amounts of the votes going to Gary Johnson in here. But I really don't think. I do think that the 5% and 10% of these states will be made up with like the high Latino populations from 4 years later. So I don't really see that really changing anything. I think that the 4% in Arizona will be enough to narrowly keep Arizona as a Republican state in 2020, but maybe it could flip. I don't really know at this point in time, but it will trend towards the Democrats. There's a high Latino population here, and it's people are Latinos aren't as enthusiastic for Joe Biden, but I do think that they will try to vote out Trump. California, I think it trended towards the Democrats in 2016, and I think that will continue. You do have a sizable Latino population here, and you don't have a lot of the voters going to Gary Johnson like in other places. So I do think that it will narrowly trend in favor of the Democrats. Then we have the South. I do think that in general, the South will narrowly trend to Joe Biden. Places like Mississippi, South Carolina, Missouri, Indiana, which isn't really in the South. But those states will trend towards Joe Biden. Donald Trump kind of reached a peak with these states, and I don't really think that he could improve as much. I don't think that Joe Biden will win any of these states, but I think that the margins will be closer. He could get the African American vote in these three states, and he'll get some of the anti-Clinton voters in Indiana. So now looking at Alabama, I really don't know what to say about Alabama. I think that it might narrowly trend in favor of Joe Biden just because he could get the African American vote, and the same thing in North Carolina and Georgia. It will trend towards the Democrats. Doesn't really mean he's going to lose the state, but I do think that that it will trend towards the Democrats. The same thing with Virginia. It's not really a toss-up anymore. I do think that it'll do well here. Now I'm going to characterize Washington and Oregon as trending towards Trump. Let me get the Oregon map. Gary Johnson got 5% of the vote here, and the margins were only 11% in the state. Hillary Clinton only won 50.1% of the votes in the state. That's very interesting. I don't think that Oregon will flip in the near future, but it is going to get closer. It's going to narrow up. You have many rural areas which where Gary Johnson split the vote with Trump. That now that won't happen. So I do think that the margin will be around 10%, which will mean that it trends into the trends towards the Republicans. I think that Washington trended towards the Democrats actually because Gary Johnson took 5% of the vote here. I think the same thing applies to Washington. So I think that it would be characterized as trending towards Republicans. I'm having struggles over characterizing Alaska. I really don't know. On one hand, there is a high Native Alaskan population here. You have you have a sizable chunk of the voting bloc here that's Asian. You also have many people, many Cruz voters in here, libertarians. Gary Johnson won 6% of the vote here. I think that's enough to make the state trend towards Trump, even if it's by a little. Then you have Hawaii. I don't really know about Hawaii. I think that it might narrowly trend into Donald Trump's column. I think that he may be able to improve with. I don't know. I think he might be able to improve in the state, but Joe Biden, he's Obama's VP, and Obama's from Hawaii, so maybe that would just be enough to make it narrowly trend into the Democrats' column, Democrats' favor. Oh, you have Texas. Texas is trending towards the Democrats. It doesn't really mean it's going to flip in 2020, even though polls are very close in there right now. I do think it will trend towards the Democrats. I can't see it going uh, by over 9 points to the Republicans. I think it will go by around 6% to the Republicans in 2020. So it will be 3% shift in the Democrats' favor. I think that Iowa and Ohio, Trump did really well there. I think that Biden will get many of the voters who voted for Obama in 2012 and 2008. So you could see Iowa and Ohio going shifting towards Biden. I don't think he's going to win it either of these states, but I think that they've kind of reached their limit for now. And West Virginia, I do think that it will trend a little bit, not that much, towards Biden, just because he's pretty popular with the voters here, but some people don't. Some people haven't viewed him that favorably throughout his administration. I think that these states were closer in 2012. In 2008, it was a toss-up in 2008. I do think that he might be able to get many of the voters out. I don't think it's going to be enough to make any drastic changes in the states. So now I'm going to go to places like New Hampshire in the Northeast. If I say that, I think this is going to honestly, this is a tough one because Gary Johnson won 4% of the vote here, but Donald Donald Trump has really been unpopular in New Hampshire. He's not liked here. Joe Biden has the Northeastern appeal. He really helped Obama in the states. I think it was a likely state in 2008 for the Democrats, and even in 2012, Republicans didn't even try to win the states. I do think that it will shift towards Joe Biden pretty narrowly. Gary Johnson won 5% of the vote here. He's really one of the reasons that Trump didn't win Maine at large, but I'm really doubting um, if Joe Biden, if Donald Trump can win the state. I think that all of Maine will trend towards the Democrats. It won't be by that much, but I do think that it will be by a lot, not a lot, maybe like 1 to 2%. You'll see Maine at large shifting towards the Democrats, the first and second congressional districts. And now we have Arkansas. I think it's going to trend towards the Republicans. Donald Trump has a solid lead here. I think that he could expand here. Maybe I think Hillary Clinton did a bit better here just because she was from the state. She was the first lady of Arkansas. It really didn't help her at all, but maybe it did like by 1 or 2%. Some people who still thought of her favorably from her time as the first lady of Arkansas. Louisiana has a growing African American population, and New Orleans, it's It's a hot spot for the Democrats. Very it's a very democratic place, and I think that the African American vote will be very large. In this state, I think that it will trend towards Joe Biden. Now we have. I'm going to go to Delaware. Delaware was actually close in 2016. It wasn't that close, but at least according to me, it was a likely state. It went to Hillary Clinton by around 12 points, not exactly, but it was a big margin. It was still a big margin, but Joe Biden was a senator from the state. I think that will be enough to flip Kent County. I think that Joe Biden will do well in the state enough to flip it. I think, not flip it, sorry, to make it shift towards the Democrats. The same thing with Maryland. You you have a high African American population here. The areas around DC, you could see high voter turnout for Joe Biden. Also, I think that the state of, not the state of, the District of Columbia, I think it will narrowly shift to Donald Trump. This is because some of the government officials who have moved to DC to help with the administration, Donald Trump's administration, I think they're going to vote for him. It might make like a 1% shift, not that much. I don't really think it really shows anything about DC. But yeah, it will narrowly shift to the Republicans. Then we have Connecticut and Rhode Island. Sorry about that. Connecticut, that was a likely state because it went by under 15% to Hillary Clinton. Then we have a place like Rhode Island, which was a safe state. I do think that Trump could make a play for Rhode Island, narrow the margin. I think that it will narrowly shift towards Donald Trump. Rhode Island is shifting towards the Republicans. It's not by a lot. I really don't see it flipping in the next 10 years, maybe 20 years or something like that. Connecticut, I think it will also trend towards the Republicans, not by that much, but I think that Donald Trump could improve with people in around Connecticut. I think he will do better here. He could narrow margins around Democratic areas. It will trend towards the Republicans. Then we have New York. So New York, it went by a lot towards the Democrats. I think that it will shift towards the Democrats, honestly. Not by that much. I think that his Northeastern appeal and his African American appeal will help in New York City, especially. I think he'll do well there with the voters. He could also narrow margins with our rural voters. So I do think it will narrowly trend towards the Democrats. I think all the Rust Belt states, or at least Michigan and Pennsylvania, will narrow up. They're going to be very close. Even if these two states stay with Trump, they will be closer. You could see Joe Biden doing well in the Philadelphia suburbs here. He could make a play for Erie County. This went to Donald Trump in 2016. If he does take this county, it would be a win for the Biden campaign. It will be very good. He could also narrow margins in Michigan. There is a high African American population, especially in Detroit, and I think that he would be able to, even if he doesn't win the state, which I think he will, I think he will be able to make the margins favorable to the Democrats. Also, Wisconsin. I'm having a hard time with this one. This was the state that favored Trump the most. This is a very rural state. The best areas here for Democrats are Dean County and Milwaukee County. I think he'll do a bit better here. He did do well in the primary, so you could see Wisconsin going to Joe Biden. Not the state, but it's shifting towards him. I do think that now looking at Minnesota, I think that Minnesota will trend. I think it will trend narrowly towards the Democrats. I think that he'll do well with some rural voters here. He could get voters out in Minneapolis. Sorry. I think that it's honestly not going to shift by that much. Many of these states are going to really stay stagnant in their shift, but it will have to shift in some way. So I'm just going to say that it shifts towards the Democrats. Then we have Florida. I don't think Florida will flip necessarily, but I do think that Joe Biden will be able to get out some Latino voters in the states. I think will be enough to narrow the margins. So I think he'll win Florida. He will do well with the senior citizens, the older voters. He does really well with the older voters. So I think that he'll be able to narrow the state, make the state closer. Nevada is it's very hard for me to characterize. I do not know where we'll shift. Gary Johnson got 3.3% of the vote here, and I'm having a hard time with this one. I think that it will narrowly trend to Donald Trump. He has a strategy for the state. I think that the Latino voters will go to Joe Biden, but I don't think it will be enough to make the state trend towards the Democrats. I think that Donald Trump will run up margins in rural areas. He might even win in Clark. Well, I don't think he's going to win in Clark County, but he could narrow the margins in Clark County. So I do think it will trend narrowly towards the Republicans. Then you have Illinois. I think this one's pretty hard. I don't know how to characterize it, honestly. Hillary Clinton was, I think, well, this is her home state. She was a senator from New York. This is her home state. I don't really think it helped her. I think that Joe Biden will do well with the voters in Chicago. I think that might be enough to make it trend towards the Democrats. Sorry. Then you have Kentucky and Tennessee. Usually, every single election year, you do have an opposing party taking almost all of the electoral votes. It just happens. Margins bounce back and forth. You saw that happen in 2012, 2016, and I think it's going to happen now. We do have many rural voters who might go to Joe Biden. He does do kind of well with the white working class. That's why he was chosen as VP for Obama. I do think that he'll win. He'll win more voters in Kentucky than Hillary Clinton. Now I'm just deciding over Tennessee. There is a high African American population in Memphis, Nashville. I think that might be enough to give this give Tennessee to Joe Biden. It will shift towards the Democrats as opposed to the Republicans. And the last state is New Jersey. New Jersey went by 14% to Hillary Clinton. That's a likely margin, at least what I think is considered a likely margin. It's not going to go to the Republicans for many, many years. I do think that Joe Biden is very popular around this area. I think that it will narrowly trend to the Democrats. It might still be a likely state, but I do think that maybe he'll be able to make it go to the Democrats by 16%, which would make it a safe state. So this is how the trends will go. This doesn't really show who will win each state necessarily, but if Donald Trump wins a state, if he's won a state in 2016 and now it's still red, that means that he's confirmed to win in that state again. But the same thing for Joe Biden. So this is what I think will happen, how every single state will trend. So yeah, thank you so much for watching and have a good day.